the most important reform, I suppose, took place in 2003. So about 12 years after the Cadbury Committee reported in the UK. And what was proposed was a very significant reform to the Japanese governance system that would have meant we had a kind of more European or more UK style governance structure put in place. But interestingly, only about 2 or 3% of Japanese companies decided to pursue this particular governance structure, and that figure remains the same today. So a lot of people have asked the question, continue to ask the question now, whether Japan has actually learnt anything from the UK or the US, in spite of a huge amount of pressure that's been applied by, in particular, institutional investors. I think what hasn't happened is the Japanese haven't yet appreciated or haven't been able to appreciate the fact that it's the underlying processes that are important. So what is really, really important, it appears to me, is trying to understand how power is balanced, for example, in Japanese companies. At the moment, there actually seems to be a good balance of power, but the power, the power structures tend to be between employees and directors. In the UK and in the US, it's, I think, more generally understood that the power needs to be balanced between shareholders and directors. I think one of the real problems that Japan faces at the moment is trying to understand its corporate governance system in its own terms. This is something that I think requires more research from academics, and it certainly requires better understanding on the part of practitioners, so people actually involved in corporate governance, and by that I particularly mean international institutional investors. I think these are the people who have a lot to gain and a lot to lose from good, sound corporate governance structures and processes. But at the moment, my feeling is that a lot of these organisations don't really understand the way that governance is affected in Japan at the moment. What people tend to do is frame the debate in ways in which they recognise. So they take kind of European or American ideas about what is good corporate governance, and then just kind of transpose them onto the Japanese system. It doesn't look like it works, but actually the governance processes may be working in different ways in Japan, and this is where I think we still need to carry out a huge amount of research. My research, for example, indicates that instead of having, I suppose, hierarchical governance systems in place, you have more social governance systems in place. So people, directors, employees, suppliers, customers and so on, hold each other to account. So there's a kind of social process going on whereby people feel responsible and people feel that they're being held to account. I think in the UK system, in the US system, there's an assumption that it's the role of the shareholders to actually hold the company directors to account. Good corporate governance is really, really important in helping companies around the world, but particularly in Japan at the moment, I think, kind of reassert themselves globally. I think in terms of improving the general performance of Japanese companies and encouraging foreign investment to come into Japan. It's really, really critical in these terms. Japan has now had 2 decades of very negligible growth, and I think this is something that the Japanese authorities are taking very, very, very seriously at the moment, especially in view of the challenge from China. Japan desperately needs to to up its game. It's still a very, very, very powerful economy, but it's stagnated for 2 decades. To recover, it needs fresh ideas. It needs fresh investment. It needs to integrate itself with the global economy much better, and to do that, it needs to up its game. It needs to make sure that it has systems and processes in place which encourage foreign investors and also foreign talent to join these organisations and help stimulate growth.